Okay. Hey y'all, how y'all doing? It's been a minute. It's been about 6 months since I've recorded anything. I think I dropped something in February, March this year, and it's been my intention to come back and pick up what I started. But honestly, life has happened. I started to travel a whole lot, hang out, socialize, work, just spend time with family, really maximize life. And I've neglected this. So I am finally picking up the buck, and hopefully these videos will be a bit more consistent to not only help others, but also to be an outlet for myself as I continue to navigate through this new life for me. So today y'all see that I have a guest, my husband, my baby daddy, my best friend. Uh,
Sometimes best friend.
Sometimes, because we get on each other's nerves. But if you're married or you're in a long-term relationship or relationship at all, you know. So that's no explanation needed. But I love you though.
Love you too.
So he is going to help me facilitate this discussion so that it will be more back and forth dialogue rather than me just talking to a camera, because that's still something that I'm working on. So hopefully this will be a good discussion. You ready?
I think so. I mean, all we can do is hop in and do the best we can.
All right. Okay. So last video, I think I did an introduction of myself, what kind of happened, and why I chose to hold on to the news as long as I did, and finally disclose this information at the beginning of this year after I had finished chemotherapy and immunotherapy and also had undergone 4 surgeries, two for port
We have to move the port.
placement, and then one for double mastectomy and placing tissue expanders, and then another for actual implants. So I kind of wanted to get through the journey. It was difficult to process. So when I felt comfortable, sharing information with those outside of my family and my close friends, I did. So now that I'm here, I'm happy that I shared. I'm not gonna lie. It still is a struggle sometimes. It is a struggle not only to talk about it, but just to live through it. Fear of recurrence is huge for me. I'm pretty sure for other survivors, the fear might not be the same. Everybody's journey looks a little different. But after being diagnosed with um, cancer, it's kind of just like, okay, well, I got to live on pins and needles to make sure it doesn't come back. And no matter what you do, you can never guarantee that it won't come back. So that fear of recurrence kind of, keeps me, a little bit more bottled up than I would like to be. But I'm working on it. So with that being said, this is a part of the journey. This is a part of me overcoming that fear. And even if it does come back, I'm not speaking that on myself, but I know that, God equipped me with the strength to get through it. So if it happens again, I'm pretty sure that He will equip me with the strength, the network, the love, the care, the support that I need to get through it. But that's not the plan. So how you want to start?
Well, you're doing good. It took a while for us to get able to get here, so she's doing great. You're doing a very good job. So we definitely want this to be as organic as possible. I mean, this is telling her story, and all the time is it easier for us to tell our own story. If this, she was speaking on somebody else's behalf, probably be a little bit easier. It's always easier to be a speaker for someone else,
right.
than it is to sometimes be an advocate for yourself. So, with that being said, I know we talked a little bit before in the first video about the diagnosis, but how would you define who you are outside of your diagnosis?
So y'all, another thing, I'm not a good speaker just off back. I normally have an outline with some answers. I'm going off the script. I
That's
mean, we
exactly what
got
we
some
want.
questions, but we don't have any answers. So
Absolutely.
if I, slip up, stumble, just bear with me. I'll get better with time. So who I am as a person, I'm loving, I'm caring, I'm goofy, silly, I would consider myself pretty smart, pretty compassionate. I believe I am a great friend. I am there. I am supportive. Did I say intelligent already?
You're beautiful. You didn't add that.
Oh,
I mean, my beautiful wife.
you
My
know,
beautiful wife.
you know. Thanks for hyping me up. But those are some adjectives to describe me. I think after everything, I do realize that I am strong. I am resilient. I think before the diagnosis, I knew that, but I didn't know that to this magnitude.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm definitely strong. I'm stronger, I'm wiser, I'm better.
All right. So thank you for that. But I nicknamed her Street Fighter. I even got to put on a bell for her because sometimes you don't know how strong you are until you have to be. So
Right.
she a little Chung Lee over here. So
Who?
Chung Lee.
Okay.
That's it. So now that we know how you identify yourself, which I think is good because sometimes, I think people identify themselves with the diagnosis. So I thought it was pretty good for you to, identify and share with the people who you are as a person, right? So now we're going to go bag it up a little bit, right?
Bag it up.
So your background, your upbringing, your faith-based Church of God in Christ, preacher's daughter's life. What was that, and how did that help with your diagnosis?
All right, so
or hearing your diagnosis.
I grew up in a very close knit family. My mom, my dad, my older sister, 4 years older. Both of my grandfathers were pastors, so needless to say, I was in the church 24/7 growing up. Tuesday night Bible study, Friday night choir rehearsal, YPWW. The Kojic folks know that acronym. Sunday, you got Sunday school, you got Sunday afternoon service, and then you got night service, evening service. So 3 days a week in church. Rarely ever doing a whole lot of extracurricular activities because I needed to be in church. But as I got older, I broke away a little bit more and I had a bit more freedom to, play sports, stuff like that. So being a preacher's kid, I mean, you're forced to go to church. You have no other option. Like we didn't have options like the kids have options today. Like you was going to church and there was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So that forced me to have a relationship with God. So I knew who God was from an early age. And, fast forwarding 30 years later, being able to kind of look back and, appreciate going to church, having a relationship with God, really understanding who God is, period, and who God is to me really helped during this time. Not only this time, I mean, life happens. We all go through things, right? But I think during this time, I'm not going to say that I was completely faith-filled the entire journey. There were some moments, and more than moments, there were some days, there were some weeks where I doubted, I questioned God, I questioned my faith, I questioned myself, I questioned how I ended up in this predicament. But through it all, I never, lost track of the bigger thing. So although I'm going through this, what may seem like a living hell, sick, vomiting, diarrhea, all of that, like I might have had my bad days, but my good days definitely outweighed my bad days. So I won't complain.
All right.
But I always was able to kind of go back and say, throughout all of this, God has got me. And I will say that going through this actually pulled me a little closer to God. Yeah. I remember being super sick on some of those days after treatment. And I had my journal and I would come downstairs in the other bedroom every morning and write, whatever was on my mind and really just pray and read scriptures to the point where I hadn't done it like that before in my life. So, I mean, that definitely helped.
Okay. So, and we talk about before your diagnosis. So, did you have any thought, and I know this is kind of an odd question, so I'm going to try my best to phrase it. So did you have any idea, I know, coming from a place, coming from a very faith-based background, you saw people probably with different illnesses, different ailments. cancer is always probably a little bit different, right?
Yeah.
Than somebody with a leg pain or
Right.
back pain or car accident, just other things going
Mhm.
on. So, what was your perspective, even as a believer, when you got your diagnosis?
I mean, nobody expects to wake up and get the news you have cancer
Right.
or you've been diagnosed with cancer.
Mm-hmm.
So I will say this: prior to the diagnosis, I think the news of other people having cancer began to spread rapidly. Like there were at least 2 or 3 people that are in our network that were diagnosed with some form of cancer.
Mm-hmm.
So hearing them being diagnosed, I'm thinking, oh man, that sucks. That's awful. Never realizing that it would have been me, right? So, I mean, you think about it. You see the commercials on TV.
Sure.
You see the sad movies where a movie started off with somebody passing away from cancer or ending with somebody passing away from cancer, but you never think about that diagnosis. So to answer your question, prior to this, I didn't think about, ever being in this seat.
Yeah, and I think as we talk through movies, TV, other diagnoses that we heard about, I think as I remember we talked about this before, where it became to be kind of heightened, right? Where you would hear an illness, you would hear a diagnosis, you would hear something, but it didn't really hit home, until somebody who's very close to you had it, right?
Right.
And so that's why I asked that question, because we all have a different perception. We can, hey, it ain't that bad, it ain't that thing, or it could be like, hey, that's the worst thing in the world that can happen,
right?
Right.
And then, so bad that they just say the C word. They don't say the cancer anymore, because
correct.
I don't know how that helps, but
Right.
I mean, however you
and
get
that's people's their own healing journeys
Absolutely.
probably got them to that part. All right, so I know people probably want to know, like, well, you got this diagnosis, it had to have been starting from somewhere. We had to, where were we, what did we, and that's a story all on its own. It's probably a whole separate video. But what happened? What was the onset of how you got to be discovered to have it?
So I had some pre-existing medical conditions that, I mean, weren't, dire.
Yeah.
But I would just go get my physical annuals, every now and again. Not every now and again. I think I stayed on top of that pretty much at least every year.
Yeah, I would say so.
So one night we were sitting on the couch watching TV, and I don't know what I was doing, but apparently I was feeling on myself. Not like that, but in a self-aware kind of thing.
In the way that they knew in the Bible.
No, not in that way. Don't start rumors on this here thing. So I felt something, and I'm just like, I think I feel something, and I don't know if I had you feel it that night.
I think the first time it was, you felt it, and I didn't know what you were referring to.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then I continued to monitor it, and it never went away. I didn't know if it was from like my cycle or anything. So I had a appointment with the OBGYN because at the time we were considering starting a family.
Yeah.
So we wanted to we wanted to get a prep start on that to make sure that we were doing everything that we needed to do to be in a healthy position for me to support a life and for him to, impart life. So I went to my gynecologist appointment, and I just shared with my gynecologist, hey, I think I feel something in my breast. Not sure what it is. Do you mind checking it out? So she checked it out, and she's just like, African-American women typically have dense breasts, and they are sometimes kind of lumpy. But because your paternal grandmother had cancer, I want to just send you for screening. So I went and I got screened. I think this is September of 2022.
September.
I went and got screened, had a mammogram, had to wait almost like at least a month or so.
Yeah, I think it was either 3 weeks to a month, because I think of the type of test, if I remember correctly. It wasn't, I think we were expecting for it to come back a little bit fast.
We were expecting for it to come back fast.
Yeah.
It was a mammogram. I had to wait at least 3 to 5 weeks. And it was coming up on October, where breast cancer awareness is heightened. So people are getting tested and all that other stuff. So I waited finally got the results. When I got the results, they were just like, hey, it's inconclusive. We need you to come back and do an ultrasound biopsy.
Biopsy. That's
So
what it is.
they did the ultrasound biopsy where they actually took a large needle and actually extracted some of the tissue to send to a laboratory for testing. And I think the results from the lab probably took another.
No, I don't think those took the longest.
It might have taken like 2 weeks.
Yeah, because the first test was the longer, and then we were just like, okay, but then I think the second
Second
test
was pretty quick.
Yeah, and maybe because we were kind of
Yeah, I
waiting
mean,
for the
we
reply.
were waiting, so I think even if it had turned back in a day,
Yeah,
it would
it would've
have
felt
seemed
like-
like a long time.
Absolutely.
But I think it was at least a week or two. When my doctor called, and I think my husband was actually closing the deal.
That's why I said it's a whole separate video. It was
Yep.
a whole separate situation.
She called and she was just like, "Hey, Ms. Butler, I hate to be the one to tell you this news," and I'm just like, "Hold on, wait. Let me call AJ, get him on the line."
Yep.
So called him on three-way, and at that
And I'm
point,
in the store at this point. So go ahead.
At that point, she just gives us the news, and I think in that moment, and forgive me because it was 2 years ago. I'm not gonna say I blocked it out of my memory, but I don't remember the details very, very, very well. But I know in that moment, I remember my heart dropping, and it almost felt like it was surreal. It felt like we were just, I was in this space and I was just here. Like, I don't think in that moment I was overwhelmed with sadness or anything. I think I was just so numb. I was just trying to process. And I don't know. How were you? How did you maintain in the store?
So 2 parts. So let me start with this, and I'm gonna go back. I've never really told you this other part.
Oh.
So this is the first time she's hearing this too, and I've been trying to, therapy and God. Let me just say, without the Lord, I don't know. But so, yeah, let me start with. Let's start from the call, then I'm gonna go back, and then I'll tell you why that was so surreal for me. So, when she called me, I was okay. So I had a deal that was being closed, and we had just gotten back from a funeral.
Yep.
And I'll tell you why that was so surreal. So we had just gotten back from a funeral, and I had a deal that was closing and escrow the next day. So I am closing the deal. We're going to escrow. I go to get my clients some gifts. That's what it was, because I was in the at-home store. And all of that day, I kept saying I wanted to be at home. So the closing got moved up. Everything was going. I had to drive a little way. It was just like everything I thought was tying up that day. And I just remember when she told me, like, it was so hard because I had to then go back and sit in the closing. Yeah. I left the store, was in the car having my moment. It was really, really tough. I was boohooing. I ain't gonna lie. But then I had to pull it together because I got to sit in this closing with my clients here. Firstly, my clients know us, so my clients here, and then the other people across. I wasn't in a position to really tell my clients. So I was trying to, again, just hold it the best way I could. Like, I was fumbling with my phone. I remember I had to sign something, and I was like trying to get the pen together, but I'm still trying to be happy for them. I got balloons. I got stuff for them. So I'm trying to, keep a smile. They're like, you want to get in the picture? I'm like, nah, I'm going to take a picture of y'all. And then I really, really, really got to go. So I'm saying that to say I was ready to go and come home. I ended up having to drive another hour because we closed in Scottsdale and they were moving to Avondale.
Okay.
And they had to give me the keys.
Okay.
So I had thought I was going to be right back home to be by her side, and I had to make another hour drive that I hadn't anticipated. And that hour drive, I felt like the traffic was bad. I felt like the tires was tire light came. I just felt like everything was going on. Got my clients together, then I come home. Finally get home, and so by this time she spent a significant time by herself, and I was just like, I kind of just fell to my knees. It was one of the hardest discussions to hear, and then because I wasn't here with her when it happened, I think it kind of hurt more. Now, the part of the story I haven't told you, because I think you know all of that. So this is a little challenging for me to talk about, so I'm going to try my best to go ahead and do it, because this isn't my video, but I believe it's important to the context that we bring to you today. And I'm going to see if you remember any of this, because again, remember she said she blocked a lot of this out.
Not intentionally.
Not unintentionally,
Okay.
right? But it was a difficult time, and we can recognize it was a difficult time. So we can, So we're leaving Auntie Carletta's funeral, right?
Mm-hmm.
We are getting on an airplane, coming back home.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We're on the airplane, right? I'm doing work for the client, and I also remember bringing my work computer. You were so worked up on the plane because you were so anxious. I haven't, what is tomorrow going to bring? We knew they were going to probably call tomorrow. Mm-hmm. She finally, now the flight from Chicago to here is probably about 2.5 hours.
About 3.5.
I think she was worked. Sophie usually stays up quite a bit of the flight, but when she got on, I think she was just so mentally exhausted that she actually started to fall asleep. So I started to fall asleep because finally she was kind of getting ready. And this is where the story kind of gets, a little sentimental, I guess. I remember sitting on the plane and I was dozing off, and I actually said a prayer to myself. And that prayer was, God, let the results be negative. Let the results be, inconclusive. I would rather have to take another test than for her to hear that she has to do this again. Go through this, right? And so I'm sitting here, and as I lean my head back, I believe it was God's voice. I will go to my grave knowing it was God. I very seldom say stuff like that.
Well, we ain't talking about going to the grave.
No. But I'm just.
But I get it. I get it.
So I remember laying my head back. I went to close my eyes after the prayer, and he said, "She's going to have it, but you're going to live. She's going to live to be longer. She's going to live longer than you." And I remember sitting up in my seat, and Sophie was like, "Are you okay?" Because I kind of jumped up, and I remember taking my computer out. I just remember just finding Excel spreadsheet. It probably didn't have anything to do with anything I was supposed to be working on, but I just remember just typing away, like just doing this away. And I was just like, is this for real? And so it was like, a part of me was like, okay, it was just that very firm voice that woke me up. But at the very same time, I was sitting saying, but that wasn't my prayer, and it's like, this is where you talk about where your faith is, where I'm like, I've had faith to see people through some of the worst situations, and this is probably one of the biggest prayers. It wasn't extensive.
I mean, but
it wasn't right. And to be a response that fast and to say, he told me, which is why it hurt so bad when I heard it, because it just edified that was his voice saying that. And that was hard for me to be like, well, this is the first time I always say, well, am I hearing from God? And I heard from him. And I'm like, well, that ain't what I wanted to hear.
Look, he ain't say nothing.
I haven't said
I think we at least had a couple days to a week in between. He did not say anything. But what was funny, I can't say that God confirmed that with me. All I can say, and I have a tendency when I'm in a situation, I would draw the best possible outcome and the worst possible outcome. But in this situation, from the first time I got that mammogram, I was kind of like judging the nurses around me and the techs around me. And it was, I think I had about 3 tests. And in every one of those tests, I always got the feeling like, oh my goodness, this is going to be a thing. Yeah. And as I had more and more tests, it became more and more surreal. But I didn't want to, claim it. But in the back of my head, I kind of figured it was going to happen.
Yeah. Absolutely. So that was probably the saddest discussion to have. And the fact that I've never ever shared that story with you.
This first time.
I don't think anybody, but probably Vaughn, probably knows that story. Because I had to talk to somebody, and I was just like, how could I disagree with God? But I was consumed in my mind that I got that wrong. Like I couldn't even talk to you about it because I was like, I don't think I heard him right. I don't think this was what I heard.
Even if that's what you heard, that's still a difficult conversation to have with somebody. And given the space that I was in, I don't know if I don't know how I would have received it.
And I don't know if it was for me to tell you. at that time,
Yeah.
right? That was
Mhm.
my prayer, and I believe that was him answering
Your prayer.
much faster than I ever anticipated. Much faster. I mean, it was almost like somebody had literally scoot up in their seat behind me and actually said it. I mean, it literally woke me literally right up, and definitely made me feel kind of uncomfortable, right? Because I mean, who am I going to have an argument with? You sleep, and I'm having this moment, so I'm just dashing it out on the keyboard. So that was that whole part, right? And so we fast forward to we've understood. So now we're like, what's the next thing, right?
It was a whirlwind.
It was a whirlwind.
It was a whirlwind.
I mean, we went through one doctor. We thought we had everything worked out. I think you had connected with, was that Stephanie and her auntie then? Or?
Yeah, you know, a lot of name dropping. These
Yeah.
people may want to be anonymous, so
Well,
let's not name drop until we get their consensus.
Well, I don't have any socials. I don't have any last names. All I know is the names. So
Okay,
if y'all want to sue me for this content,
I ain't got no money, so you can sue him.
You can find me at www.mywifehassurvived. Thank the Lord Jesus.com.
So look, so after we got the diagnosis, when I tell you I've never been inundated with information so quickly.
So much. Yeah.
They were throwing information at me left and right. I think we had to make some quick decisions.
Very quick decisions. Yeah.
I was during all of this, we still had to navigate emotions. We still had to navigate life. Yeah. Both of us still were working. Yeah. You were doing your, normal 3-4 gigs. Mm-hmm. I was doing my gig, trying to, maintain life as normal as possible.
Best we could, yeah.
But I started off with one oncologist, and then I got a second opinion from another oncologist. And even in getting the appointments with getting and having the appointments with the oncologist, mm-hmm. not all the time was the information congruent. Mm-hmm. Like I would get messages frequently, even to the point of, prior to starting treatment, they were rushing me to start because it was stage. At first, when we did the first test, it was like, okay, it's stage 1. And then a couple weeks later, or maybe not even a week later, the first oncologist called, like, you know what, it's not stage 1, it's stage 3. You probably should start treatment very quickly.
Because we thought we had some time.
Right.
Started treatment.
And still to this day, I still don't know if I needed to start right away. But I mean, nevertheless, we prayed about it, and that's what we chose to do.
Yeah.
So the treatment was chemotherapy every 3 weeks, mm-hmm. on a Thursday.
Yeah.
I would be in the chemo chair for about 5 to 7 hours.
Easily.
And that was for 12 weeks with chemo, and then 18 weeks, total of 18 weeks. Of those 18 weeks, 12 was chemo, 6 was immunotherapy. Mm-hmm. In another video, I'll break down chemotherapy versus immunotherapy, but not today.
Yeah.
So we had decided to do that, but prior to doing that, I had to get a port put in. And prior to that, because we were family planning, we needed to meet with a fertility specialist, because when you go through chemo, they basically shut your ovaries down, your reproductive mm-hmm. system down to kind of protect your reproductive system. So prior to it all getting started, I think we had like 1 or 2 weeks to decide whether or not we were going to get eggs harvested, what treatment plan, if we were going to do a natural treatment plan, which facility we were going to go with. Mm-hmm. And it was just a lot.
It was so much that I think that was probably one of the first times that I said, okay, I normally don't try to put my foot down, but I said, we're not doing this right now. And remember, I drove.
The egg harvesting. Yeah. So we had
too much for you to have to worry about right now.
Right. So we had actually went to the facility.
Yeah.
We got meds. I would have to do a daily injection.
Yeah.
And then after doing a daily injection for a week, I would actually have to come in and actually have surgery for the egg retrieval.
Mm-hmm.
And mind you, this is one thing, but then we still have to get the port placed because the port placement would be easier rather than trying to do chemo through a vein every 3 weeks. So I had come out of the fertility clinic with the stuff.
Yep.
We actually came home. We had to refrigerate the medicine.
We did.
And then we talked about it, and I think we both decided, you know what, if having kids is for us,
correct,
then we'll be able to do it at a later date.
Absolutely.
And in that moment, I think the next day we called the fertility clinic to just say, hey, you know, we're not going to do it. What should we do with these meds?
And then they said they were going to charge us. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to drive it back out there. So, because you know I'm all about the money. So I said, okay,
if it ain't about the money,
if we not going to use it, and thank you for your office visit, that I will pay for. But this equipment and this material, she said, well, have you opened? We haven't opened anything.
I never checked to see if I got my money back for those, because I had to pay for some of that meds.
I think that they gave me a receipt. I think they made sure that we got our money.
Okay.
Because if not, I could still call.
I mean, that's 2 years ago. Care. Let it go.
It could be $40. I'm calling.
Okay.
But yeah, so I remember that part too. Yeah.
So we said no to the fertility treatment. We went and got I had surgery for port placement, and this is where the mixed messages. They started early, and still I think after I had surgery, April of 2023, I still got mixed messages up to that point. And if I were to call both oncologists to get feedback, I'm sure that their feedback would still be different to this day. So the first oncologist and breast surgeon had the port placed on the left side. Their logic was, hey, it needs to be on the left side, on the opposite side of the breast cancer. So I'm like, at this point, again, we're in decision mode. Yeah. We just gotta go. I didn't think to research or ask questions because the professionals are telling me, hey, this is what you gotta do.
Right.
So we get the port placed. We have my first treatment at the new oncologist. Right. The new oncologist says, well, why is the port on that side? You know, it should be on the other side. Yep. And then in between treatments, I had to get another surgery to get the port moved from one side to another side. So that's another story about for another day, because a lot of times you go through these treatments and it's so many mental and emotional battle wounds that are forever going to be with me, but to also have the physical wounds, the physical scars, it is another thing. So now, not only do I have one scar, I've got two scars where both of the ports were.
Yep.
So that's a little bit about the journey. I'm pretty sure this session is longer than we anticipated.
It's been a minute, so y'all bear with us.
Yeah.
We won't be before you too much longer.
And if we are, you can always just stop the video, come back to it, or maybe not.
So I know we talked, and this is not to, it may sound like we're questioning God in this, right?
And
but it's normal, right? I want to normalize questioning. Right, and normalize questions, because we're human and we have these experiences. We do have these things in life that happen to us, and we're wondering why me. So I'll ask you, when you felt, or did you feel like why me? And if you did feel like why me, why did you feel that?
Man, I wish I had my journal right now. That would be too raw though.
Well, later time, maybe you could have a private Patreon group that could just read with her for $14.99 a month. But go ahead.
Ain't nobody charging no $14.99 a month. Don't listen to him. But I probably will share some of that stuff. It was very, very intimate, and as I said on the first video, I'm working on being more open. But it's still something that I struggle with. Hence the name of this session, or this series, Taking Off the Armor. But the point is that I am going to take off of the armor and, be vulnerable and just talk about this stuff, because the diagnoses are the diagnoses. are rapidly spreading. People are being diagnosed left and right, and it's no longer, hey, you're over 40, you're over 50. It's 30s, 20s, teens, children. It's becoming more and more prevalent. So I'm glad you asked about, or you mentioned, normalizing questioning God, because people are just like, well, don't question God. He knows, he knew before you were formed in your mother's womb. I hear y'all. That's great. You know your scriptures. Kudos to you. But I'm also human.
Absolutely.
And in times of distress, in times of extreme emotions, in times of horrible news, it is okay to question God. Like, God, how did I end up here? Why did you choose me? Like, I think I'm a decent person. Have I done my fair share of wrong? Absolutely. We all have. But have I done that much wrong to get this diagnosis? And I think in the beginning, I questioned, how and why this happened to me. And every time I questioned why me, the answer that I always got was, why not you?
Why not you?
That's not the answer that I was looking for. That ain't the answer that provided comfort, but that's the answer that I got.
Yeah.
So the why not me is kind of just like, okay, well, if it's on my plate, I'm gonna have to figure out how to eat it. If it's on my plate, he's preparing this plate for me to, ingest, digest. So I'll get through it. But in the moments of the why me, I would be absolutely lying if I said that there weren't moments of extreme anger, extreme bitterness, extreme sadness, extreme just questioning myself. Like, am I worthy? Like, did I literally for a second start going down my track record? Like, dang, did this cause this? Did this cause this? And did this cause this? And it really just made the situation worse. It did not help me at all. I think through all of those emotions, just coming back to that answer, why not you? And just living it out day by day. And, going into that downstairs room as my prayer room, my meditation room, my room where I legit got on my knees and cried until I couldn't cry anymore. So.
Yeah, I mean, everything that you're saying, right? Whether, it is a diagnosis or an extreme loss or something like that. I mean, I think sometimes we say, well, you shouldn't. And I think that we're removing the power for that person to feel in those moments, right? And I think that, I'm seeing and hearing all of this now. I think living it was different, right? Because, you want to, say, well, hey, take it out of her and put it in me. I'm stronger than she is, so give it to me, right? And that we know that's not possible, right? We knew that some of the things that we were asking for weren't possible, but even for that moment, it might have even felt good to be extreme. Does that make sense? So, yeah, I mean, seeing you navigate that, being here with you while you went through that, it spoke to what, and for most of y'all who don't know what Soph didn't answer, she is a very type A person. So her answers, or looking for answers, is just who she is, right? It's almost like, okay, even had you said, well, because I stole a piece of gum in 5th grade is why I got this, it would have just said, well, why was that gum? Because I did something else. You know what I'm saying? So it's like you want to get an answer, but it's just like, is there ever an answer for something like this, right?
I mean, and to add on to that, I know you were going a different direction, but also the type A, the control, right?
Well, that's that part of that, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah. But in all of this, it's kind of just like, okay, how much of this can I control? So other treatments, how much of this can I control? Right. And at this point, it was very little that I could control. I literally had to roll with the punches, and that was extreme for me. It was extreme to let go and just be like, okay, I gotta go with the flow. I'm not going to have everything figured out. I'm not going to know how my body is going to react. I'm not going to know, I think the doctors and the nurses probably were fed up with me at some point because I would go in asking questions and I wanted an entire plan. Like I am operations leader by trade. I project manage by trade. Like it's in me. So I literally was trying to project manage this cancer diagnosis.
Yeah, you were, and they didn't need you to do that. And I think what it was doing was creating. No. I'm saying that to say that they didn't need you to do that, but I think that sometimes we don't know the additional pressure because once you are the project manager. Had they said, okay, so Phil, you lead this it would have just added a different layer of frustration or anxiety.
Okay.
And you're already at a heightened state. And that was, the teeter-totter was happening all the time. Because some moments she would be like, okay, well, I don't know what to do. I'm going to do it. And I'm going to go with what they say. Then the next one she would say, well, I don't trust anything that they're saying.
Absolutely.
Are they giving me the right information?
Absolutely.
And then she'll reverse and say, oh, you think I should apologize? So a lot of it was like, okay, so now there is a little bit of emotional piece happening at the same time, in addition to her control. So it's like one was fight. It literally was. I was
like an angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other.
And I would see you fighting with yourself, and I was like, okay, you can't beat yourself up on both sides of the table and get to healing. Like we're gonna have to just let you just kind of sit the control driving seat. Just sit back. We're going to try to find, and if there is anything that we need to do or any questions that we need to ask, then let's just do that. But I think that because you were also in those groups, I think she was doing a lot of reading. She was reading a lot of
half the stuff that I was reading, I couldn't even retain. And also, like you said, being in those groups, reading other people's stories, it was kind of just like a hit or miss. And depending on the day, it could have went either way. But I do want to say, so you're right. Me trying to control the project schedule, the plan, everything, could have come off the wrong way. And sometimes I probably did overdo it. But I do want to emphasize the importance of advocating for yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And in those moments where, I did not know what I was going into, having done research and writing my questions to, talk to the doctor and advocate on behalf of myself.
Sure.
I think it played a big role in things. I encourage people to definitely advocate for yourself when it comes to your health.
And we had a lot of discussions about doing natural medicine and all of that kind of stuff too. So, I mean, in the midst of all of that, that was also roped into the discussion, right? And as I had to understand, I think working in the hospital, I wasn't in the medical side, but I knew I come from a family of nurses, right? And so they used to always tell me medicine is you're practicing it, right? It's not perfecting it, right? But so no. But it's still a practice.
But you practicing on me, dog.
But you're practicing on you. And so what I'm saying about that is that the other person who may have had a similar diagnosis could have had a different outcome. Because the practice was to get them to a state when they were better than they were when they started, right? You don't ever, with being cured of cancer, there's always this, I want to go right back to who I was before.
Okay, you going too far.
No.
That's for another episode.
No, I'm saying to say, in your mind, the end of your project was to be back to before your diagnosis, right? And I think as this journey went through, you kind of just evolved into a different person. That cancer didn't evolve you internally, but the way you handle things, I think now it just kind of had you evolve a little bit different, right? Because your life will never, lives are never
going to be the same.
Right. So we can't go back to where we used to be.
Okay, I get what
We're evolving to who we are now with the experience.
Okay.
And I think the project management side and some of that side was just like one part of you wanted to say, could we just hit rewind? Right? Could we take this DVD out or a CD out and
just
start,
crush it?
Absolutely, and just start over.
No, not start over.
Well, start over from scratch. Like before I have this, because if you
before the diagnosis, you said?
If you knew what the reason for the diagnosis was, a part of you says, could I go back and undo that?
I got you.
Right. So that we knew that even if they told you, I'm just kind of pulling it all together. Even if they told you what it was, we couldn't have undone it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
But it's harder to go through, right? And so it showed a different side, right? It showed that your fight, your fight. It showed your dedication. But it wasn't without any upset. It wasn't without any confusion. It wasn't without any anger. You know, I can say it was all heaven, but it wasn't.
Oh.
Right? It wasn't all heaven. There was some bitterness.
With sprinkles of hell.
There was some
mixed
fear
all in there.
And I believe that, and this is me saying it, having been your husband through the process.
Mm-hmm.
It showcased something different that people probably don't have to experience this until they're in their later years in life and marriage, right?
Right.
And so because we were trying to family plan, in addition to getting this diagnosis, there was this conflict of, well, then did we wait too late, right? I mean, we were talking about, but maybe we should have started. You used to talk crazy saying, well, maybe I should have had a baby at 19. And it would just be like...
That would have been awful.
Right. And then it would just be like, well, you probably would have, but you would have had to then do this walk with somebody else.
But they would have been grown by now, practically. I know we over time.
We are.
And I know this segment can be broken up into
It can.
So
we
many...
could probably, and y'all probably will see, because my wife be trying to edit, but y'all might get some clips that might come from a different video.
Anyway, this segment could go so many different ways, but you mentioned the family planning portion of it. And when we talk about the feelings,
right.
I have never been that person that like said, hey, I was born to have kids. Mm-hmm. Like, I love kids, have godkids, have a niece, nephews, love them to pieces. I mean, love kids, right? So the idea of having my own kids was just like, man, that seems like it would be dope. Mm-hmm. I don't mind if I do, don't mind if I don't. But I think we had just started to really get to that point where it's just like, okay, we both are getting older. Let's just go ahead and, get it started. Mm-hmm. And getting this diagnosis and then going to see the fertility specialist and then them saying, hey, you don't have that many, healthy eggs and this, and this, and this. And then seeing everybody get pregnant and have kids. Y'all, when I say that, the emotions from that caught me off guard. Yeah. Like being bitter and angry, seeing somebody with a newborn baby. It's just like, how are they having kids? And here it is, I was just trying to plan to have kids. And here we are. It ain't gonna happen right now.
So think about, and this is where I always get torn about this, right? Because we talked about, doing the family planning. And I remember asking, I think it was one of the doctors, right? So had we not started the planning process or the discussion and just decided to just do it, right? Mm-hmm. And had just decided to do it. And I think one of the things that haunted me for so long was, okay, if we had just not done the research or not did the inquiring about the fertility part, and you have been pregnant, and then we got the diagnosis. Remember, he said, well, if you have been pregnant, there would have been nothing that they could do,
or very little
they could do for the cancer. And I think that would have added, if not as much stress, a little bit more, had you got the diagnosis then. Mm-hmm. And then I just think it probably would have just really, really changed a lot of how we would have moved, right? Mm-hmm. I think I would have treated you so fragilely doing those. Not that I didn't treat you fragilely when you were, doing this process, but I just think that would have probably, because then that would have been like, so then what, right?
No. Yeah. So, I mean, definitely everything happens for a reason.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm glad that you brought that point up, because the doctors did say, it's better to find out now than later. So, again, although this might not have been the news that we wanted, it was the news that we needed at that point.
Yeah.
I just wanted to, we talked about the emotions, we talked about the why me, and that is a point of conflict or a point of tension that I did not expect to experience because I just didn't expect to experience it. So when I started to experience it and experience strong emotions, it was kind of just like off-putting. So
Yeah, and then being able to have those emotions, right?
oh
And
yeah.
being able to process them the best way you can. It was new for both of us, right? And so, thank God for therapy through this process. Because as a husband, you want to make it better. And there's just things where I'm just like, she's in pain and I can't
Can't take it away.
Can't do anything about it, right? And so, when you felt angry and either confused, or even if you weren't in pain, but you were just super agitated by it, it was just like this whole ordeal is super frustrating, right? And so easily, I could have, taken it and said, well, you frustrated for me for no reason, but because of therapy and understanding how the mind and how the body works, and then just knowing who you were before, it's like this is gotta be difficult, more for you than it is for me to be angry because you upset about something I probably didn't do at the time, right? But it required me to be a bit more gentle, where there was discussion that I probably I can be gentle, I am gentle, but sometimes I say stuff and it don't come off the right way. But in this moment, I when we talked about like the why me God, and I would hear you say, God, I don't want to have to deal with this. I don't want to be bothered with this. I just want to do this and I just want to do that. I was like, man, those are real feelings.
Yeah.
Those are real feelings. Yeah. Like I could imagine being in a room.
I'm waiting until you just name drop and just give a shout out to your therapist. But don't do it. Don't do it. Yeah. But if the therapist is watching,
the therapist,
you know who you are. And I think not only from your perspective, but from my perspective too, navigating, being sick, not being well, going through not only physical changes, but emotional changes, mental changes, not being able to think clearly. Just being on an emotional roller coaster. One day I'm okay, the next day I'm not. Physically, I don't think the only thing, physically, I didn't drop weight. But my appetite was off, taste buds was off, had mouth sores, eventually lost my hair. But I had gone through so many transitions with hair. It was an easier transition. But being able to navigate all of that and have a therapist who was consistently there, like when we say consistent, I mean consistent, day in, day out, helping whenever she could. Like, y'all, if I never was an advocate for mental health prior to this, I definitely am now. Although I have been seeing a counselor for quite some time, but
and it's a different stage.
It is a different stage.
It's a different stage, right? It's like I said, it's nothing that you would expect to have to go through. And then the people who probably have gone through it, it seems like that group is so small. And now that we found out that group is not that small. It's not. There are so many women who are doing this every day in these diagnoses. Men too, because men, I understand now, can get breast cancer. I didn't know that. But there are people who are doing this whole journey by themselves. And I just said, God, if nothing else, I'm happy that she does not have to do this by herself.
Yeah, I think in the first video, I talked about the support network, and we still going over, but I guess that's okay.
We can probably cut some of this stuff, but
but the support network, the support network was huge. Like, having the therapist, having you, having my parents, my sister, nephews, in-laws, my tribe here in Phoenix, my friends that knew about it, they all pitched in, like, didn't really have to ask for much. And even if you do ask, and I'll talk about this in a future segment, like in these times, I didn't know what to ask for. I just knew that I had to do chemo, and I didn't know what my body was going to do. I didn't know how I was going to react. I didn't know how I was going to tolerate it. So I didn't know what I needed.
What you needed.
until I had actually gone through some sessions, and each session had different side effects, right?
Yep.
So if you are in the network of a loved one or someone that is experiencing this diagnosis, just know that if you ask how they can be supportive, don't expect an answer. Just you literally have to present options. So if that means, just sitting and being in a room with them, not necessarily to talk, but to just be there in their presence, or send food, or offer a prayer, or send a candle, or send a text message or a phone call, understanding that they may not want to talk, but just offering those suggestions and just seeing where those suggestions resonate makes the world of a difference. So going back to where we first started, therapy, hands down, best decision ever. And having a good support network, it made the difference. I'm gonna tell y'all this: if I did not have a husband, a family, close friends in my tribe, maybe I would have thrown in a towel. But we did not throw in the towel.
We did not throw in the towel.
We're still here to tell the story.
Here. Absolutely. So with that, we are going to just kind of set the cadence. We're going to do some additional interviews with other family members and people who are close, probably some discussions with some other people. I think that I think you're doing a good job, baby. I think this is probably, it feels like it's too late, but everything has to happen in the right time.
Everything happens when it's supposed to happen.
Her having the courage to be able to do this, she did so good through this. So I'll give her a hand. She did such a good job doing this. And I'm going to always be here to support her through this. But definitely stay tuned. We look forward to connecting with you all through other videos, through other media outlets. I don't know where this is going, honestly, but it can only go up from here. So.
Well, we'll see where it goes, and we'll just try to be a bit more consistent. And if y'all have any questions or any discussion topics that they see us looking at the paper. You don't got to hide it underneath the table now.
Well, that's what they do on the news.
Oh, okay.
They just look down at it.
Okay, so coming to you from 9017 Butler Drive, we will see you in the future. Thanks for tuning in. Again, if you have any discussion topics or any questions that you would like us to or me to discuss, feel free to drop it in the comments, and we'll see you next time.
Next time.